I want to welcome you all to our webinar today. My name is John Balcom. I work here at Traverse PC. I'm also an LS, and a couple times a year I get roped into doing projects free gratis. I say roped into it, but actually I'm happy to do it. This particular project we got preliminary approval for early last fall, and we're just waiting to wrap up approval on some lighting and some landscaping, and then we're about ready to do the subgrade work on it. I'm volunteering my time for the surveying and the planning. Gary Rose is volunteering his time for all the subgrade and underground work. So this happens to be for a church. One of the things they do is every Friday they send grade school kids home with a backpack full of food. These are kids that are underprivileged, might not have a square meal otherwise, and I think they're up to about 120 of those a week now. So I appreciate what they're doing, and if I can save them some money on getting this parking area developed, I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to cover today the site survey that they asked me to do to begin with. And then we're going to walk through some of the planning process. And this isn't unlike a lot of projects we're involved on. We've got to meet the city requirements. We've got to send this off to the engineers, get the information back, incorporate it into the planning process, eventually stake it out on the ground. So we're going to take a look at the parking layout, the grading and drainage, pavement and curbing, bioswales and landscaping, overhead lighting, and construction phases. And we're going to go all the way from the beginning, which was a site survey, through the end, the construction phase. Now, Traverse PC has some really great tools for creating and revising all aspects of the process. And I just want to touch on some of those today so you can kind of maybe say, oh, yeah, I've wondered if I could do that. So I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I don't want you to take notes because you'll miss something. But if you just want to jot down, ask about something later, feel free to do that. I'll try to answer a few questions at the end, but feel free also to email us, and I can respond to your email and direct you maybe to a video that pertains to that particular question. I'll also send you a link to the recorded webinar so you can go back and watch parts of it again if there's something that you want to do yourself. So let's just go ahead and jump right in and take a look at this project. I'm going to open up just a preliminary drawing, kind of where we started with this. And then I want to bring over the folder here for the project. So you can kind of get an idea here that, and this is how I do my jobs. This happens to be 2017-100 Crossroads, so it's got a job number and a client. And then I create folders in that job folder because I'm dealing with the city of Florence. Eugene Sand and Gravel is going to do our paving and curb. Gary Rose is the contractor who's doing all the subgrade and underground. Hubble Lights is engineering the lighting for us. Laurel Bay Gardens is doing the landscaping. I always take photos when I'm working on this stuff, so I've got a folder for those. Here's all my research for the deeds and the surveys. And then I do a little thing where once we're at a certain phase in the planning process, I just store everything off into a subfolder. So by the time we got done with revision 2, I stored it all off. Same with revision 3. We're working on revision 4 right now. When that gets done, we'll store it all off. That way I have an archive, and I can always go back and pull up exactly what we worked on. So I always have a copy of what I've sent people, and I tend to keep those in the folders like that. So let me go ahead and move this out of the way. If I need to bring that back, I will at some point. So let's talk about the site survey here. Now, all of the drawings that are stored here all in the one survey file. So I could open this up anytime and come in and kind of see what we did and what we worked on. And that's why I just came over here and opened that site survey. Some of you will notice that I'm using groups here. So I've got my bioswale typicals in a bioswale group, and I can just close that down. I've deleted the most of the revisions, previous revisions, but I might have some of the drawings from revision 2 or revision 3 left over. Remember I said we're working on the lighting right now, so I still have the R3 drawing for utilities and lighting until we get that finalized. And I just came over and opened up my site survey. Each drawing remembers which traverses are tagged, and I'm typically in something like this going to have my tax lots, okay, for the property we're working on. I use the point codes to separate the points into traverses, and so that's why we're going to see this, top face of curb here. We're going to see the symbols for the power poles and the water meters and whatever. So this is what the site survey produced for us. I started out with just a Google Earth photo, and I'm working in state plane grid coordinates. So I brought the photo in from Google Earth, and all I had to really reference was the center line of some streets here. It turns out the only thing I have out here to hang my hat on is one iron pipe down here in the southwest corner, I found some other monuments, not of record, that were laying flat 4 feet under the ground. So I don't have a lot to work from other than the street alignment. So the photo that I picked was just fine. And then I go ahead and I always crop the photo in the drawing. So if I put the cursor over that edge of the photo right there, I've got a rectangle. So I've got a whole photo in here, but I came in and just drew a rectangle up around my survey, and I don't have to clip that photo or anything. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on kind of the details like that, but just want you to know that just gives me a real clean look to the survey here without having to do a lot of work. The other thing I want you to notice real quickly is that I tend to use a lot of photos just so they're all on the same page. This particular cap here says a water valve, but this is a sewer clean out for the house that used to sit here. So I've got the notes that say it's a sewer clean out, but I've also got a picture that says it's a water valve cap, so that when they come out and look at that, they're not confused about it. And I do that for all the utilities that are out here, the power pole, the anchors, that sort of thing. I like the photos. I'm not going to be measuring off of this because it's not an accurate enough photo to do that, but all the drawings I'm going to show you today have a background photo behind them so that we can talk about landscaping around this garage that's there, or we can talk about where we're going to access the property from the streets. So we started with a site survey, did all the typical stuff. Property corners, property lines, streets, alleys, sidewalks, driveways, curb cuts, utilities, topography, fences, buildings, vegetation, and turned this in, and it got the project off the ground. So let's switch over next real quick just to city requirements. And I want to go over to a parking layout drawing. And let's just talk a little bit about some of what the city is going to require in this. So I've got some notes over here. I just jotted down some of the things that I knew we'd have to address with the city. Notice that we've got entrance here for traffic. We're going to have 2 entrances up here, but we need some pedestrian access. And so I'm going to use this power pole area where the anchors. I can't use a full stall here. So I'm going to make that a pedestrian way, but the city's going to make us stripe that. The city also says for every so many parking spaces, you need to provide so many bike parking spaces. So we need, we're providing 9 bicycle spaces, 7 are a required number. And they do interesting things like they have to be as close to the church, which is west of us here, as the nearest parking space. They have to be lighted, they have to be signed, they have to have certain access. And if you notice in this photo here, I've got some existing pavement here. We're actually going to pull out this pavement back from the sidewalk and use that for a bioswale. The city actually wants us to do that. We wouldn't have to. We want to be kind of good stewards of this project with the city. So we kind of said, okay, we're happy to do that. And we're going to leave a little bit of pavement up here in the corner for the bicycle parking. So we met those requirements. They have certain conditions on traffic flow. So we're going to have a new curb cut here, a new curve cut here. We're going to use the existing curb cut down here. And we needed to get approval for those, and we did. Okay, so we're dealing with those. They kind of like the single direction in or out. Those are kind of the preferences. So you can see how the flow works with the arrows that we put in here. Alleyway, this is interesting. We have an existing driveway cut right here. And originally I thought, well, it'll be real easy. We'll just jump out and use that, or we'll kick out of the alley here. But the city said, if you want to access the alley, we're going to make you improve the alley. That means subgrade, rock, and asphalt. No way we're going to do that. So we went ahead and used put in a new driveway cut here, and I think we did just fine like that. Interior parking islands. You'll see a map later on where these show the vegetation in them. But the city says for every so many spaces, you need a certain square area of interior islands. Each of these islands has to have 1 tree in it, has to have certain plants, quite a lot of regulations with those, and we meet those. Paving and curbing, okay? So you can see I've got this brown line for all the curbing here. Everything that's uphill is solid curbing. Everything that's downhill on the flow has to be segmented curbing so the water can run through it into the bioswale. So we've computed our lengths for all that for the bid item on that. And I'm not going to turn on I don't have the lighting on in here, but we have requirements for lighting. We have requirements for storm events that we have to accommodate with the paved area. We have ratios of permeable to impermeable area. And then when we actually go to plant out the vegetation around here, we even have requirements for certain species and certain heights. It gets kind of detailed. And you know, a lot of what I am going to end up doing or have ended up doing on this one is just coordinating it. So I'm going to pass off lighting to the lighting engineers, pass off vegetation to the landscape folk. That's really how it needs to be done, but someone needs to coordinate that. And so I've kind of volunteered to do that. And it makes sense since I'm helping with the planning and all the mapping stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just jump right in to the next item, which is parking layout. Okay, so let's stay in this drawing and let's talk about the laying out the parking. And really that's the first thing I did because I had to know where the striping would be and where the alleys would be or the traffic ways would be before I could put the curb cuts in. And I needed to know how many spaces we could get in here and play around with that a little bit to try and maximize the space. So this is what we've ended up with. Using the city's 60-degree angle template, they need an 18-foot aisle space between the parking stalls, 60-degree angle. And what I did is brought up the city's information. So let's just bring that over here real quick. And bring up the City of Florence parking. I'll drag that back over. So you can see that we get a number of options as far as parking angle, but each one comes with distance requirements, length requirements then for distance along the head of the stall, the length of the stall, all that sort of thing. I tried a couple of them. I originally thought we'd do best with the 45. I think we got 48 spaces, switched to the 60, and I knew I'd have to kind of play around with that a little bit because of how the lot was laid out. I just didn't have enough width to do the perpendicular parking stalls with what they had. Notice that I've got to do a 5-foot setback from the property line here, 5-foot setback from the property line here. So I was limited in how much width I could use, either just 60-foot wide lots to begin with. The city wanted us to pull out this existing pavement here, and we wanted to comply with that. So that further reduced. So I really was stuck with this 60-degree parking layout and played around with some others, but and ended up here. So once I knew that's what I was going to do, I got to come in and say, okay, I can go ahead and lay out my 4 rows here. If I'm going to end up using this existing curb cut, I probably could pick up 1 more row down here. Well, once I had done that and met these requirements, I now pretty much had my paved area. So let me just start there then. I'm going to come back to the traverses. Again, you notice that I use these groups here. So all my pavement and curbing and stuff is here in this parking group. And here's my final pavement traverse. I don't know if you know about this, but I often come in and I say delineate that traverse. And look what it did. It went ahead and drew this traverse in kind of this light blue line. And it gives me a really nice way to kind of look at that. Sometimes, if I want to draw just that traverse, I might open up this final pavement traverse, okay? And I use this button right here that says draw just this traverse. It's another way to come in and say, I only want to see that particular traverse because I'm doing something with it right now. I'm sending it out to bid for the paving guys, or I want to check some measurements on it or some distances on it or whatever. And because I've got a traverse all set up for that, I now have any areas that I need for the bid items. And you can probably imagine we're already talking about, you know, we probably will pave all of this to begin with and then come back later and dig these interior islands out. It just doesn't, it's too hard to pave around these. And Gary and I talked about it, and we both kind of done these projects in the past where you put in all the rock, you put in all the pavement. I'll come back later on and stake these out with some paint. He'll take his cutter in and cut these out, dig through the rock, try to salvage that, and then dig down and create the bedding area for the plants. So we start with our area like that. Notice that down here in the legend, I've got delineated the parking, the pavement they're going to remove. Okay, and I can come back here in these traverses and just turn that on. Okay, so we're going to remove some old pavement here. We've got a section of old pavement we're going to remove up here. Another little section down here. That's all of the old pavement we need to get rid of. I'm talking to the city now about letting us use this existing pavement here in lieu of cement sidewalk. And then we have to build sidewalk across the northern part of the lot yet. So I pretty much know that I've got what I need for paving area. I don't have time to go into it today, but I started out by saying I want a 5-foot setback from these property lines all the way around, and then I just used Kogo tools. So when I wanted to do something with this point here, I just put the cursor over it. Okay, that's the tangent for final pavement. And I tend to go to Kogo and then do what I want. So I need to create an intersect with something with that point. Okay, so this allows me to bring that point right in, and then I can go ahead and start doing that. Maybe I want to use a tool that says compute point. I do this one quite a bit, compute coordinates. So I want to start somewhere at some bearing and distance and compute this point, but see how it automatically brought in 0.221 for me right out of the drawing there. So sometimes I'll say, instead of doing that, I want to go right into the traverse. So I'll say edit traverse, and Traverse PC opens up that traverse and highlights that point, and then I can do the Kogo from here. But I'm mostly using intersect, compute coordinates, and some of the right-of-way offset tools to do this, because I need to meet these setback requirements. You know, I'm 5 foot in here. My striping has to be 6 inches off here because I need a curb, 6-inch curb in there. Over on this side, I need to leave a foot of pavement past the 6-inch curb, so I'm 1.5 feet in before I do the striping. So I need to lay those out pretty exact in order to get what I want, and so I use the Kogo tools for that. Now I want to jump right into the striping. And again, I told you I've got lots to cover, and I'm just not going to have time to do a lot of it. I'm going to turn off some of these layers that we don't need here, and we're going to talk about this striping here. You'll see me use this quite a bit. I just go right here and turn those off. I don't need this one on either. I put those on proposed parking layer. We don't use layers an awful lot in Traverse PC, but when I do planning like this, I create my proposed layers and I put stuff on those. So my bikes are on a proposed layer, the lighting's on a proposed layer, the curb details and curb are on their own layers, and then I can just turn those off as I want to. Let's do parking, turn that off. Okay, that'll kind of clean this up here for us just a little bit. So let's talk about putting in this parking striping here and how we do this inside of Traverse PC. I'm just going to go ahead and untag this particular traverse, and we're going to do that again here so you can see how that works. I'm also going to turn off the background photo just because it's kind of tough to look over the top of a lot of times. And I already told this background layer, I just told it to ignore it, okay? That's this right here. I ignore a layer because I don't want the mouse to interact with it. So once I've got that background photo set where I want, I don't want to be bumping it or moving it. So I put it on a background layer and I tell Traverse PC to ignore that layer. And now I'm going to turn that layer off. Okay. And I can turn off what other layers that I want or other traverses I want. I don't want the final curb in here right now. Okay. I just want the east side of the property, of the pavement here. So I'm going to work off this east line over here. And here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell Traverse PC that I want to create a new traverse. And you're going to see me do this a number of times here today. I'm going to come down into my 60-foot striping. I just turned off this traverse right here. So I'm going to make sure that that's my current selected traverse. So I'm going to tell Traverse PC that I want to put a line in over here. And I'm going to come to the drawing and do that. I'm going to tell Traverse PC I want to add points to drawing. And I'm going to insert this one before the 60-degree striping, and I'm going to call it 60-degree striping 0. Now, the option I'm going to choose down here, let's choose our formats here first of all. I'm going to use a parking stripes and parking stripes. So I went into one of these other traverses here, and I saved these formats. So this is going to have the information I want in the traverse view, and this is going to draw it the way I want. So I can come in here and say, okay, this is the format that I use for the parking striping. I had been using yellow. I can switch this black back over to whatever we were using on this one. And same for side shots. Okay, so now that I've got the format set up the way I want, I'm going to look at these options, and I need to get familiar with this. But the one I want is I'm going to select existing survey points, or snap to objects, or left click to create a new point. And then I like to just give these some kind of a, you know, point label and description to go with. Okay, and I'm going to tell Traverse PC, okay, go. So now I'm going to start with the end of this line up here. So I'm going to use the snap end command. Traverse PC is adding that to the point. And then I know I want to be down here somewhere. Okay, I wasn't quite sure. I didn't, this is based on the parking striping angle. I might not have this in yet. So I just need to get down here close. I'm going to use the nearest command. And then as I come over, I know I'm on that line and pretty close to what I want to be. I'm going to press enter to end that command and then take a look at the traverse that Traverse PC gave me. Okay, now if I want, I can go right into Kogo and I can translate this and I can say, I want you to go basically 6 inches some direction with this thing. Okay, so I'm going to tell it I want to go the bearing along this southern line down here because everything's based on those lot lines there. And I want to go a distance of 0.5. Okay, and I want to translate the entire 60-degree stripe 0. Okay, so now I've just moved that traverse over a little bit. Now let's go ahead and talk about putting these points in for us. Now I want to show you how I go ahead and put in the striping for this. If we bring back that document from the city, we see that for a 60-degree spacing here, we need an 11-foot curb length, they call it. So my distance between stripes is going to be 11 feet, okay? And then I'm going to stripe them with whatever the requirements are. I think they have to be double striped, so wide, okay? And if I do the math on this for the missing length, it's 23 feet long. So let's keep that 11 feet and 23 feet in mind as we take a look at this. So I'm going to tell Traverse PC I want to insert multiple points. So let's go ahead and insert multiple points first. Multiple points. And here's where I want to put in that distance of 11 feet. Okay. And I'm going to tell it, go ahead and just use like a PS1 or something. Tell it the next label. Use next available point number. So they'll all be numbered 6, 7, 8 like that. Okay. And let's go ahead and compute that. So now Traverse PC has put in a point every 11 feet. And I've got this 1.32 feet left over. I can either tell it go another 11 feet or I can just get rid of it. I won't do it right now, well, yeah, I guess I can. Let's just get rid of that point. Okay, now let's use another Kogo tool that says right away offset. Now I'm going south, so I want my lines to be on the right side. Here's that 23-foot distance. I'm not going to give it any additional information for labels, and I want to create offsets. So let's go ahead and compute that. Okay, so Traverse PC just put in a offset point at the beginning of every 11-foot section. Okay, now if I was doing perpendicular parking, I'm done. I can put in the appropriate distance for that. I've got my 11 feet, I'm done. But I don't. I've got to do the 60-degree thing here. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in to Traverse here, and I'm going to tell Traverse PC select all of the offset points for me. They're all selected, and then I can either pull down the menu and say change these to side shots, or I can just hit F10, and now they're all side shots. So what's important about that is that offset points don't have a direction. They use a whammy where it bisects the angle or goes to the radial point, that sort of thing. But I actually want a direction because I want to be able to specify that 60 degrees. So let's go back. This time I want to select all the side shots, okay? And I want to go over to that direction now. And notice I'm just going to type in a direction for one of them, but I basically want these things to be 60 degrees from the line going down. So I'm going to do a 360. Now, I might not get it right first time. Oh, he did. Okay. So it's either 30 degrees or 60 degrees, right? But now Traverse PC has stored that distance, that 23 feet, for each of those stripings and the angle. And I can come in anytime I want and simply change that. So I've come in and created that parking striping pretty darn fast. And remember I said I had that little leftover point down there. I could have left it in. It would have created its own stripe, and then I would have deleted the side shot and the point. Now, some of you are looking at these little islands in here, and I want to bring up one of these traverses and show you kind of how I did this. So I'm going to go to the end of one of these parking stripe lines. I'm going to say Edit Traverse, and Traverse PC is going to open up the traverse and put me at that point. So when I did this thing where I selected all the side shots and I changed the angle, I got raw data in here. So I'm going to tell Traverse PC, do a Shift F9, and it's going to display for me all the raw data that's there. So View, Raw Data. Okay, I'm looking at the raw data that's being stored in the traverse, and it has all these bearings and distances in there. So that means I can come in and change any one of them. If I wanted to move that island up a little bit, okay, watch what I do. That's a distance of 8.5. I'm just going to move that up, 8.5. I'm going to come down to that 11 and put the 11 back in. And now everything just moved up. Here's my 8.5 foot distance here, curb length distance here, and I just created a full parking stall down here. Now I can move this island up here. I've got to do the same thing on the other side, but see how easy that is? Or I'll just put it back. I'll go 11, and I'll say 8.5. Just put it back. I love traverses. We started with traverses in '87, and people always say they're just like layers, and I say, well, you know, maybe you could think of them like that, but they do a lot more than layers do. So I really don't I don't want to mix them up with layers, because they really are some amazing differences there. I'm going to have a lot of things here I'm not going to have time to do, but I want to show you how we can move these things graphically. So I have a traverse here, which is in my parking island area over here. Let's go down, interior parking landscaping. So it's P5, and again, I could use the whole delineate thing there to bring that up. I don't need to. But let's say that I had wanted to move this up here. So I'm going to put the cursor over anything that's drawn by that traverse. I'm going to say move. Okay. But Traverse PC says I selected a survey object. So do I want to select all the objects associated with that traverse and continue? If I do, I can move the traverse. If not, I can't move the traverse. Okay, so I'm going to say yes. I'm going to pick a base point now, and then I'm just going to pick this up and move it up here. Okay, simple enough. I just did the same thing I would have done with a Kogo Translate, but I did it graphically instead. And I do this all the time when I'm sitting there with a client and they want to stake the house out on the property, but they want to get just the right angle, the right view. We rotate, translate, do all that stuff directly just like this. So object, I can move it back, or I can just say undo and put it back where it was. Then you saw that I turned on some of the labeling in here. Parking dimensions, let's turn that on. And parking, turn that on. Just want to show you how this works, because I know sometimes you're looking for tools to do this. I use the dynamic offsets quite a bit, and that's what I use to label these as well. So I need to tell the city that we've got certain distances here across, okay, whatever it might be. Let's just do one of these so you see how this works. So I'm going to select the layer. Now I turned on the layer bar. You don't have to have it on, so that I could pick a current layer, because the next thing I draw is going to go on the current layer. So I want to make sure I'm on the parking dimensions here. Then I'm going to come down and choose dynamic offset. And I'm going to follow the prompts. So it says left click starting point. I'm going to go to the end of one of these parking stripes, okay, and see how wherever I move this, I get the distance. Now watch, I'm going to tell it go perpendicular, that's the P, to this parking curb length here. Watch what happens. It just beeped at me and said I can't find it. Okay, anyone know why? It's because I need to go down to the next line to find the perpendicular. That line that I was just at didn't have a perpendicular to it. Okay, and I can see, depending on whatever I've specified here, that this is actually a tenth, or it might be just a few hundredths less than this one. But this wasn't one of the dimensions I had to have. I needed the space, the curb length here from stripe to stripe, and I need the width here. That's what's actually specified. And then I need to make sure I've got the aisle width here. So here I ended up with 18.1 when I needed 18. Here I ended up with 18.2 when I needed 18. So this is going to work. And by the time I get done with all this, I can say, yep, we're going to meet the requirements of the city, and we can turn this in. I think we were at revision 3 by the time we finally got to this point with it. And then we just went in and counted up some of the survey spaces. Okay, so we knew we had 16, 13, 13, 14. We've got some spaces down here, 6 spaces. We put in the traffic direction arrows, some of the offsets for the aisle width down here, aisle width up here, anything else that the city needed on this, and we're looking pretty good. So let's go back and turn on that background layer now that we're done kind of drawing those things. And I'm going to take a look then at putting in that pedestrian walkway. Went in and put in the bicycle area. I used some of the symbols that are built into Traverse PC, like for the bicycle. Just everyone knows what it is without me spelling it out then. It's kind of nice. And then the final thing we did was put in the curbing. And the curbing is a traverse, okay? So I can delineate that traverse just like I can any of the others. Let's go ahead and pick that final curb, delineate traverse. And now I can see that every place I'm going to have curb down. And we'll pick that up when we get to the paving bid items later on. And you'll notice that at the top here, we've gone ahead and said this is proposed parking layout, revision 4, the date, with any other changes that we wanted done. That also shows up down here in the title block as well, revision 4, your initials, the sheet number, that sort of thing. All of this scale came in from the drawing. The job ID came in from the drawing. The file comes in from the drawing. So all I have to do is go to the survey information, and whatever information I have here is what shows up here. Those are variables in here, so I don't have to type those in. Same way with the scale bar, that's based on a variable for the scale, and it makes all this kind of just non-work really nice. You'll notice I went ahead and added a number of these features to the legend. I just right-clicked the curb line, okay, final curbs, and I said append to legend. And it put the line in for me, and I just typed it in the text. That's a 6-inch solid curb. I picked the line that's dashed, and that's a 6-foot curb with cuts for bioswale. I did the same thing with the fills. I just put the cursor over the legend. I said add a fill item to the legend, and I got to pick a fill and name it, and added that to the legend. The legends are smart drawing objects like so many things in Traverse PC, so it's real easy and fast for me to do those. Remember, I'm donating my time for this project, so I don't want to have it take any more time than it has to. Okay, let's move on to grading and drainage. So let's bring up that grading and drainage drawing, and let's take a look at some of what we were after here. I'm going to zoom right in on the text box here. And remember I told you that we offered really to take out this old pavement here. It's really what the city would like, but they can't require us to. But I wanted it as a bargaining chip because we need a good ratio of pervious area to impervious area. And a lot of our town of Florence, we need a 20% pervious area left after the improvements. It turns out that we're in a certain corridor here where we only need 10, but the city has some latitude there, so I wanted to make sure we got the 20. So I wanted to include that pavement that we removed in the total area so that now we can come in and say, okay, we're going to end up with a total paved area in the tax lots. We're going to end up with a garage driveway, and out of that we're going to get a pervious area, and that's going to be 20%. So I want to make sure we met those requirements if at all possible in case the city kind of went sideways on us. And then if we drop back out, we can see we've got a driveway down here, we've got a garage here, and then we've got this pavement. Now I ended up, in order to do this, I had to have the paved area within the property lines. And if I zoom in here a little bit, you'll see that a lot of this is anything but in the property lines. You know, I've got some driveways out here. I've got some of this existing pavement sticking out down here. So I just created a traverse for that. So over here in the paved area, you're going to see pavement in tax lots. So I don't have the final pavement checked here for this drawing. I got this pavement in tax lots, and I just went around and picked the final paving area that was inside the tax lot, created the intersections at the tax lot lines where I needed them, so I could get this area. And if I just delineate that pavement and tax lots, you can see what that looks like. So I'm cutting out those driveways. I'm not including this little apron that's outside the tax lot boundary, not including the driveways up here, only just the area inside to reach that pervious area goal. Oh, I wanted to show you this too. I went into the Traverse Manager, and I've included the areas right here, okay? So I went into F9 format, and I included the uppercase B for square feet right inside the data area. So now any traverse that's closed shows me the square feet. And I use that square feet in all the computations, and I could include those square footages in the legend if I wanted also, okay? So I got those right out of the traverse here. So really what we're after here is now that we've got our paved area determined, and that was determined, of course, by the parking stalls, by our striping layout, we now know how much of this area is going to collect water and where the water is going to go. Of course, that's based on the original topo, and we're going to try and stick pretty close to that original ground when we actually go in and do the subgrade. Remember, we've got some existing pavement out here. We don't want to create a nightmare with getting fancy on the grading out here. And I told Gary, who's donating his time, I said this is about a 2% grade across here. So go ahead and just carry that across, and we're almost a 2% down. So carry that across. And I just gave him a couple of transects. See how I've got transect A crossed like this, transect B. Let's look at those real quick. So here's transect A. Traverse PC does profiles just as well as it does plan views. And I turn this into the city. And this is actually a 1.87, but for all practical purposes, that's 2%. And Gary can carry that 2%. The guys that do the paving, they really want at least a 2% grade to make sure the water doesn't just stand out there in pools anyhow. So this is west to east, and I've exaggerated the vertical scale 10 times. I often do that for the profiles like this. And then here's my transect north to south. Here's the proposed end south, EAC proposed. Here's EAC proposed north end. I've got a little bit of cut and fill, to do here. This is finished grade, so we'll come down 3 inches for pavement and 6 or 8 inches for rock when Gary goes out to do the subgrade work. And I'm not really concerned about the drainage here being a 2%. This could be a 1% because we've got 2% going east to west. So enough information for us to realize that we could fit this when we start doing the subgrade work. So our grading and drainage is pretty much done. We haven't changed this from when we first figured out where we're going to put the parking. But this brings us to kind of the next question here is that what do we do with this water? So the city is going to require that we retain this water on site. We do have a catch basin right here, so we could put in a structure. It'd have to be designed by an engineer. But it turns out that we can petition the city to actually let us retain the water on site. That's what they'd like us to do anyhow. And then we don't need any engineering for that. Now let's switch over to the pavement and curbing. We're going to work with Eugene Sand and Gravel. They're an hour from here, and ask them to give us a good price again, see if they can give us a good guy price for the church, try to keep the cost down. So I know they're going to want to come in and put all the pavement down in one trip, maybe piggyback that onto another job over here. And then they're going to want to do all the extruded curb again in one trip. So we're going to take a look at how to facilitate that with them, give them all the numbers that they need. Again, I mentioned they're probably going to pave over everything, and we'll come back and dig out these interior islands later. But I want to let them know where they are. I want to let them know that we're going to have this pavement cut out, and we're going to have a clean pavement cut on the old pavement here, and so they can pave right up to that. So they know the project will be ready for them. And basically then what I wanted to do for them was give them some idea of what they were looking at. So they're going to get a nice map like this on 11 by 17 PDF so they can print it out whatever size they want. If they want a DWG, I'll give them that as well. But look what we've got. We've got the area of the old pavement they need to remove. We've got the area of the new pavement. We've got the area of the parking islands. We've got the length of the 6-foot curb with cutouts. We've got the length of the 6-inch curb that's solid. Everything they need for the bid items. Plus, we've kind of shown them where the utilities are here. So they know they're going to have to pave over this valve cover here. Okay. They know there's another valve cover here, but it's water valve here, but it's not in the paved area. They know they've got some of these anchors here for the power pole that they're going to have to work around a little bit in this area. So they pretty much have all the information that they need. And again, I pulled all those areas out of the Traverse Manager because I just told it, show me what the areas are. So I've got the areas for new pavement, the old pavement that's removed, okay, all of the curb lengths and everything. I can include lengths just as well. I actually went to the closure view for that curb traverse and just pulled the lengths out of there. But lots of ways to do that. And then just a little note about interior parking islands are not paved and have been excluded from the new pavement area, so they can add them in if they want to bid that with that extra asphalt. It's up to them. You just want to give them the information that they need. So that's all I'm going to talk about for pavement curving. Oh, well, one more thing real quick. I did real quickly, just for the fun of it, if I can find it here. Yeah, filter cloth. Turn that on. It's just so easy to do this kind of stuff inside of Traverse PC. Filter cloth comes in rolls that are 12 feet wide, and they put 10 feet down with a 2-foot overlap. So I just went in real quickly and drew some rectangles, 40 feet, that would be 4 rolls side by side, or 4 widths. 75 feet. The next one over is 80 feet, 8 rolls at 95 feet. And then up here, we ended up with about 70, so 7 widths, 124. So I even had an estimate for the filter cloth they're going to need. And we did the same thing. We have to put filter cloth in all the bioswales over here. So did an estimate for that as well and turned that in a separate report. So it's just kind of fun to see that you can get all this information out of Traverse PC, some pretty easy ways here. Okay, now I want to switch over to the bioswales and landscaping. Let's bring up that drawing. So here's my landscaping drawing. And you remember from the grading design how our water flows. Okay, the landscapers don't need to see that. All they need to know is that this area over here is regular landscaping. The area inside here is where they have to adhere to the city's requirements for interior parking islands. And then we've got the bioswales. So if we come down here in the legend, we're going to see that kind of information for them. And I'll zoom in on this for you so you can see what we've got here. So the landscape folks are going to get this. They know they've got 2,500 square feet of vegetated swales. They've got 2,300 square feet of landscaping. They've got 640 square feet of parking island. And I think I'm going to talk to them about maybe putting the fence up for us too. We need a fence along the east property line, 198 feet there. Okay, but this is where I put the information on those permeable areas when we talked about that grading and drainage. So I satisfied the requirements for the 20% or 10% ratio of permeable area, but now we need to determine whether or not we need to have the stormwater retention engineered. Okay, and the city allows us to do both a presumptive approach for the sizing and a simplified approach for sizing. And I basically just added up those areas again from those traverses, okay, because each one of these is a traverse. So each one of these has an area with it, real easy to add those up and say, you know what, if we use this area that we've got and use a presumptive approach, we need 2.2 feet of depth to retain the water for a 4-inch storm event. And again, that's based on the city's guidelines for 20-year storm or a 50-year storm, whatever that was. On the simplified approach, they just need an area. And so we've satisfied this one. We haven't satisfied this one, but if the city comes back and wants us to put something else in, we've got some room down here to put a retention pond and probably do just fine with that. Or go out and have it engineered. This is the information on that interior landscaping for the parking lot with 62 spaces. We need 620 square feet. I gave them 640 square feet, met the requirements, and I'm just waiting for the final approval of this because this ties in with how we do the lighting as well. Okay. And I don't need these Traverse names on. I could turn those off. But I just want to show you real quickly now kind of what I did for this. The city wants us to have a walkway into this, but we know that across a parking lot like this, people tend to just walk wherever. Well, the city wants us to put a little bit taller vegetation in here. So I want to provide a couple of little bridges for folks to cross. This one will be associated with the paved area. This is kind of what they look like. And I hate just going to the city and saying, how about a little bridge? I'd rather come in and say, hey, we've got one spec'd out. We know what they cost. They meet the width requirements. I don't think we necessarily need your approval, but we'd like to use the bridge instead of paving this. And I can show them right where I want to put those and how they play into the design. Okay, so really nice to have all that information here. And we know that we're meeting all the requirements for the landscaping in this. I want to show you a couple of things I did also, just to kind of help out the landscape folks. In the drawings here, I'm going to come in and show you that I went in and took a look at the bioswales themselves, and we have a little bit of a hard pan issue, even though it's sand down here. So in these bioswales, I put a construction note in that we want to remove 2 feet of sand, then dig down another 2 to 3 feet to break up any hard pan. Sand will then be shaped to swale typical and filter cloth added before planting medium is added. So the city has all these rules about, you know, how much planting medium and what kind of slopes. I want to show that the bioswales meet that. And then, of course, I also was able to come up with the cross-sectional area and then a bid item for how much planting medium we need in those bioswales. I didn't do that for the landscape areas. I'll let the landscape folks do that. But this planting medium can be a pretty big item, and the folks at the church have to put together a fundraising effort and have a budget to work from. So I wanted to give them something to work from right off the bat. So I put this together, and Gary knows that when it comes to putting those bioswales in, he needs to work hand in hand with the landscape folks. I'm also talking about with the landscape folks about doing all the underground irrigation. I want them to put in whatever they need to keep this watered. And then after the first year, the city needs to come back and inspect it, make sure that it's functioning the way it's supposed to. So I'm trying to offload as much of that as I can, and I'm using Traverse PC to get everyone on the same page and do that. The other thing I did for the landscape folks is that they're not real CAD savvy, so I put in a grid, and it just came in and said, okay, here's a 1 foot grid, or whatever it was. Let's see what we actually had for it. Properties. Yeah, so here's a 1 by 1 grid. So here's every feet. They can count across, count down. The city is going to come in and count the plants before they give final approval in these bioswales. So the landscapers can turn right around and color this in with a colored pencil for plant types or however they want to do that. And they can shrink this down to 11 or 8.5 by 11 or use the 11 by 17. I gave them a PDF of this. So they've got this kind of ready to go. And then the board wanted some kind of a concept, you know, what is this going to look like when this all gets done? We're going to have some trees in here, some low bushes, just kind of something to show the board and get some approval on this. So I put that together for them as well. And then everyone's happy. We're kind of ready to go. The landscaping is out to bid. When we actually get into construction, people kind of know what's expected of them, and that'll all be a little easier for me to coordinate when we actually get there. So I'm using quite a number of drawings here, but it's easy for me to just duplicate one, add what I need, take out what I don't need. Again, these are all traverses, so I can turn them on or off real quickly. I don't have to come in and redraw any of this. I can leave the parking striping in there if I want, or take that out. Makes it real easy, again, inside of Traverse PC. Let's switch now to the overhead lighting. And I want to kind of show you the process that I went through with Traverse PC to get this up and running. So we're going to go back to the drawings. I'm going to open up the revision 3 because we don't have this part of the project finalized yet. I want to kind of show you how it works and what we're looking at. So this is going to be a little bit of a back and forth kind of effort where I'm going to ask the city if we can get approval for some variance. Ideally, they'd like to see 16-foot lamp heights in here, but in order to do that, I'm going to have a lot of lights, okay? And I can show you real quickly kind of what that would look like. I'd like for the church not to have to do this. I felt we could probably get by with 2 light poles. You know, everything is LED now, and if I could get a variance for 2 25-foot poles, I think we could provide enough light out here, but I'm not a lighting engineer. I just went out and I do have a master's in engineering, so I took the classes way back when, and I know enough about kind of how it works that it's easy enough for me to go out. Let me just bring this over to Hubble Lights. This will work. It's pretty easy to go out and really what we're interested in are lumens and whether or not we have enough light out there to be safe. So we use ISO lines for light, just like we use contours. And all I really needed was to say if I could use this particular kind of light that I was interested in and the heights I wanted, I can have the 2 lumens or 3 lumens candle foot that the city requires over that parking area. So I did some initial layouts, didn't take a long time to do that. Hubble then, one of the light suppliers, came back and said, okay, we can do this. Originally we were gonna do a bioswale right down the middle, but we couldn't get as many parking spaces, so you see that in one of the original submissions to them. So I sent them over enough stuff to get them going, and this is what they send back to us then. So basically my design with the 2 lights, they moved them about a foot or 2. So I've got an engineered proposal for the city, and we went into the city and eventually they shot us down. That would have saved everybody a lot of money. I could have done the lights for under $10,000. So we weren't able to do that. Instead, we had to come back and say, okay, we've got to go back for something more like this. So eventually went back to Hubble and said, okay, let's try this again. As of the 12th of February, this is kind of what we're looking at. If I zoom in here a little bit, I sent them a DWG with the pavement area, the parking striping, and these interior islands. And, you know, these guys are good. These guys are smart. They use those same lights that I was interested in using pretty much in those parking islands, drop them down to 16 feet, which is what the city's going to require. And then we need to go around and put all the lighting around the outside to get the lumens that we need. And then these are their lumen values, okay? So within the parking area, we're a minimum of 2, a maximum of 5. So when we see a 3.8 or a 3.9, 4.5, those are all reasonable values. So ultimately then I'm gonna wanna go out and stake out these poles, and we're gonna need to put in the underground. I wanna do the underground lighting, wiring with the water in the same ditch, so Gary has to only dig 1 ditch at a time. And of course, let me code on which ones are deeper and how far apart and all that. So I'm going to turn off this last layer here, and I'll turn off my traverse that has the lights in it. And let's talk about bringing the information back in for the lights. And this is going to be a few steps here. I hate to have you go through this many steps, but it all happens because I'm using state plane coordinates here, and the engineers at Hubble don't like that. So let me show you what they actually sent me. I'm going to open this right up in the CAD view inside Traverse PC. Here's their design sent back to me. Looks like what you saw earlier in that PDF. And if I zoom in here, we're going to end up with 3 of these double fixture lights down the middle. We're going to have 10 of these single fixtures around the outside, and then 1 of these down at the south end down here to get the coverage that we need. So I've got all the layout of these things, but the problem is that if you look at the coordinates here, I'm basically at 0, 0. And that's a lot of how these guys do that. So we've got tools to reference an XREF or to bring these over as a group. It's a lot of work to try and get it working right. And I don't know how many more times we're going to end up changing this. So I'm going to show you what I did. I went ahead and created a drawing instead here through Traverse PC that is translated, okay, and has just what I need. It has just the lighting blocks in here. It has a little bit of the park. This is really hard to see. Apologize about that. But it has all my foot candle values. It has enough of the striping and the pavement so I can reference this to my drawing in there. And then every one of these lights has a block, okay? So let's go ahead and just bring this over, and you can kind of see how we do that. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to select these. Okay, so I selected everything in the drawing, and now I'm going to say send these over to the drawing view. Okay, and I love this. So I don't have to have everything from the drawing over there. I get to send over just the things I want. And when I look at my drawing now, I don't really need this one anymore. Here's all that lighting information. Now, I want to show you this because this is really important for working with this kind of information easily. I'm going to group the last import. So now everything that I just imported is one item. I can pick it up and move it or whatever. And then I'm going to tell Traverse PC, I want to reference this to the survey. So I want to get everything on the same grid. So I just translated this up close to the state plane coordinates I was using, and I said I can get it locked on once it's in. And let's take a look at how we do that. So remember I sent the paving edge and the striping over to the lighting company because they needed that to figure out the coverage. Well, it's great for me because now I can use that to reference their data back to my survey. So I'm going to put the cursor over any part of that group, and under the group blocks, I'm going to say reference group to survey. And I'm just going to follow the commands down here. Traverse PC wants me to pick pairs, so I'm going to pick a survey point at the end of this line. I use the snap end command. And then I'm going to pick the end of this line in the group from the DWG file. Okay, so that's one pair here, ready to go. And my message view is actually telling me that first pair that I picked. Now, I'm going to come down following the prompts and do the same thing with another pair of points. So I'm going to go to the end of this sort of angled line here. And I've got that same angled line, a little harder for you guys to see, but I've got that right here. Okay, so now Traverse PC has brought that in for me just exactly where I want it. And because of how I'm going to create my stakeout points, I actually want to come in and explode this. So I'm going to ungroup that. Okay, one of the advantages of ungrouping it is that now I can go in and say, I don't need that layer anymore. So I'm going to go to Layer Tools, Modify Layer, and turn that off. Okay, all of these striping lines and everything, that's from their drawing. So it's the information that went over to them and then came back to me, which is great. But I don't need that to show up either. So again, I'm going to turn that layer off. And now I pretty much just have what I want here. I've got these blocks in here. And I didn't show you this in the previous drawing, but basically these are coming in with the pole and the fixtures. So I have a fixture at each end and I have a pole somewhere in the middle. And I want to get that information so I can stake out the location of those poles. So watch how we do this. I'm going to collapse some of these groups I don't need. I want that to end up in this lighting group down here, parking lights. And I'm going to come over to Traverse PC in the drawing view. There we go. That one's a little easier to pick there. So I've got the Lumen P5. So these are the P5. Remember they had 3 of those. So I'm going to right click, go to Layer Tools, and I want to convert all objects to survey. Okay. So I'm going to tell Traverse PC that I want to convert these things. I'm going to call them Hubble 2, 12, 18. Okay. Now, these are the P5, so I'm going to put that in for the point descriptions. And I'm going to call all the Hubble lighting just H, like that. I'm going to put this in after the parking light. So it used the traverse that I had selected over here. And the neat thing about it, it's going to add it to the lights group for me because of that. Because of where this traverse is located, it knows what group to put it in. And then I'm going to just look to see, probably just coordinates for these, but I think I created Hubble lights. Okay, so I created a setting here to draw these lights for me that has a proposed light symbol, just like I had used in the traverse before. See if I can get that. No, that's not showing me what I want. Drawing settings. Let's recall that again. Recall settings. Hubble lights. Okay, we'll just set it the way we want then. Proposed yard light, and I want this to be red. Okay, and just coordinates is fine. So I've got everything set up the way I want. I'm going to choose OK. Traverse PC is going to go in then and convert those blocks to points for me. And it's smart enough to kind of go in and figure out where the blocks are, that sort of thing. And so here's my original 2 parking lights, but here's my Hubble lights. And watch what happens when I tag this. So see how I have the poles and the fixtures for each one of these. And I'm going to go around and do the same thing for the rest of these blocks. Here's a little block here. That's the P4s. So we're going to go in, tell the layer tools we want to convert all objects. So it's going to do everything on that layer. All I have to change now is the description to P4. It's going to keep that traverse name until I change it, but I don't want to change it. I want to leave it right like that. And I'm going to go in and tell it, oh, I don't think I have to change that anymore. I think I'm okay. Let's go ahead and add those. And when I redraw it, they're going to show up as Hubble lights as well. And you can see it's a little easier to figure out now that they put the base quite a ways off, and then the light fixture extends out on an arm till it's just over the edge of the parking. And then we're going to do the same thing with the last one down here. And the blocks that they gave me for this are kind of hard to see, but I know where it's at from the other drawing. This is my P3. So we're going to do the same thing here. Layers, convert all objects. Everything looks good. We're just going to make this a P3 and convert those. Now, once that is done, I'm going to come back and just draw that. I can open up this Hubble lights traverse, and here's all my points. And I want you to know that, I've got a pole and a light fixture for each one of these. So I like using this little tool here that says delineate item in the drawing. So I can see that's the pole, that's the light fixture. And as I move to each one of these, it recenters and delineates that for me. So I can really easily come in and put a description in that says P4 pole, P4 fixture, whatever, because I want to stake out the poles, not the fixtures. So real easy for me to get at what I want. And now I have the location of all that lighting ready to go. So I turned in the Hubble plan to the city because they want to have that engineered. And this is what I'm going to use to actually go stake those out. And then you can see that, I can't remember if it's in this drawing or if it's in the landscaping. Oh, back up in this one here. Okay, so now I've got the opportunity to come in and put in my underground stuff. And you can see I've got it started in here because I knew that we'd bring water over from the street, put our anti-siphon and timers and everything here, and then water back out every place we need it. And now I need to extend the power conduit as well. I can't just go down the center here. I need to run out to the edges as well and back over here. And once we have the final approval from the city, we can kind of make those decisions, and I'll come back and compute some quantities for the conduit there. And this will be our revision 4. So I'll come up and change this from revision 3 to revision 4, put a new date on it. Instead of September, it'll be February. And then hopefully we can start building this quickly. So let's go ahead and wrap it up there. Let me bring our webinar outline back up and just kind of recap here real quick that these are our workflows that we use oftentimes in planning. We talked about everything from the site survey to the construction phases. I'm surprised at how many times we end up doing surveys that have nothing to do with property corners or monuments, for instance. Last week I was just out staking out a 50-foot riparian zone for a subdivision. And they needed to talk to the city about how they were going to manage that area. And they needed some points in quick. I don't do a lot of surveys anymore, but they're good clients, and they needed that work done. And we just find often that when we're dealing with municipalities or going through planning processes, that we need a map for something or we need something located. And I just wanted you to see kind of how Traverse BC walks through some of these pieces. This is a good project. It's not very big, and felt we could kind of squeeze it in an hour's time. And you could maybe pick up some tips on how to use Traverse BC for your own planning workflows.